Sawadee-kap. Hello and welcome to Daily Wisdom, Walking the Path with the Buddha. Today is our Pali Canon and English study group where we study the words of the Buddha. We're in volume 4, chapters 11 through 20. This book is titled Exploring the Path to Enlightenment. This is where you start to learn various teachings about the path to enlightenment. And that's what the books that we've been learning so far have been helping you to do, is build up your understanding. And typically somebody who's joined this particular program or participates in this program has already learned the group learning program, which covers volume 1 of this book series, Developing a Life Practice, The Path That Leads to Enlightenment. And there you're laying down a really nice foundation and building a framework to understand the teachings of the Buddha. And then these other volumes, volumes 2 through 13, they're really diving in deep, penetrating wisdom with the words of the Buddha, filling in all these different aspects of your practice to fully be able to understand the path to enlightenment and how to get to this peaceful, calm, serene, and content mind with joy. So welcome to all of you guys. I'm going to be starting class right in studying the teachings today rather than doing the meditation, because we have quite a bit of content to discuss today related to these 10 chapters. There's a good amount to read and learn and discuss and talk about, and you guys are welcome to ask questions as we go. So if you're in Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom, you can put your questions into the comment section and I'll see those as we go. And if you're in Zoom, you can electronically raise your hand and ask any questions or follow-up questions that you like. And the way that I usually do this program is I ask for volunteers for people who are in Zoom to see if they would like to read any of the chapters. And then as we go, you can just raise your hand electronically and you'll be able to read, you'll be able to read any of the chapters that we're covering today. After somebody reads the chapters, then I will share some teachings on that, just some brief teachings, and then open up to any questions that you have. All of these books are available on our website. You can download them for free. You can take the file and go print it, or you can order these on Amazon if you have access to Amazon. Because in addition to the words of the Buddha, you have a reference to go back to the original source teachings to be able to see what the Buddha was saying before or after the discourses that we're covering. And then there's even reflections from me to help you further dedicate time and effort into thinking about these teachings and what the Buddha is actually sharing with you. Because a fully perfectly enlightened Buddha is going to speak very clear, very concise, and very precise. His teachings don't really need any explanation, so to speak. It's more about pointing you in certain directions to think about these teachings so that you understand how to reflect on them and how to integrate them into your life practice. So that's the reflections that I'm providing you in the book, and sometimes they're very extensive, much more than I'm actually able to cover in these classes. So that's why it's important that you read either before and or after the class so that you can glean the full benefit of what the Buddha is sharing with you in his own words and what I'm sharing with you as well to fully develop your life practice. So this first chapter is chapter 11. If there's anybody who would like to read this one, you're more than welcome to. Looks like Max is raising his hand, so Max, if you would like to take it away with reading this first chapter. And what I'm going to have you do is read it in sections. So I'm going to stop you after each one and kind of talk a little bit, because one builds on the other. So it's important for us to be sure that the students understand each aspect before we move on to the next one.
Chapter 11. Cultivating mindfulness of breathing fulfills 4 foundations of mindfulness, 7 factors of enlightenment, true wisdom, and liberation. There is, monks, one thing which, when developed and cultivated, fulfills 4 things, and 4 things which, when developed and cultivated, fulfills 7 things, and 7 things which, when developed and cultivated, fulfills 2 things. Concentration by mindfulness of breathing mindfulness meditation, monks, is the one thing which, when developed and cultivated, fulfills the 4 foundations of mindfulness. The 4 foundations of mindfulness, when developed and cultivated, fulfill the 7 factors of enlightenment. The 7 factors of enlightenment, when developed and cultivated, fulfill true wisdom and liberation.
Okay, so right here you can see the Buddha is just setting up what he's about to talk about. He's going to talk about breathing mindfulness meditation and how that leads to the development of the 4 foundations of mindfulness, and how the 4 foundations of mindfulness lead to the development of the 7 factors of enlightenment. And then that leads you into fulfilling true wisdom and liberation. And as we go, I will explain what each one of these are because they're all utterly important. The meditation, the 4 foundations of mindfulness, the 7 factors of enlightenment, in developing true wisdom and liberation. This is the ultimate goal. So there's this kind of series of teachings that lead to the goal, but this isn't the only thing that you would need. There are other aspects of the teachings that you would need in order to develop the mind to get to enlightenment, but this is one aspect of teachings where you can see the connection from one to the next, to the next, to the next. All right, Max.
Mindfulness of breathing fulfills the 4 foundations of mindfulness. How, monks, is concentration by mindfulness of breathing mindfulness meditation, developed and cultivated so that it fulfills the 4 foundations of mindfulness? Here, monks, a monk having gone to the forest, to the foot of a tree, or to an empty hut, sits down, having folded his legs crosswise, straightened his body, and set up mindfulness in front of him. Just mindful, he breathes in. Mindful, he breathes out. Breathing in long, he knows I breathe in long. Or breathing out long, he knows I breathe out long. Breathing in short, he knows I breathe in short. Or breathing out short, he knows I breathe out short. He trains thus, experiencing the whole body. I will breathe in. He trains thus, experiencing the body. I will breathe out. He trains thus, calming the bodily sensations. I will breathe in. He trains thus, calming the body sensations. I will breathe out. He trains thus, experiencing joy. I will breathe in. He trains thus, experiencing joy. I will breathe out. He trains thus, experiencing peacefulness. I will breathe in. He trains thus, experiencing peacefulness. I will breathe out. He trains thus, experiencing the mental activity. I will breathe in. He trains thus, experiencing the mental activity. I will breathe out. He trains thus, calming the mental activity. I will breathe in. He trains thus, calming the mental activity. I will breathe out. He trains thus, experiencing the mind. I will breathe in. He trains thus, experiencing the mind. I will breathe out. He trains thus, gladdening the mind. I will breathe in. He trains thus, gladdening the mind. I will breathe out. He trains thus, concentrating the mind. I will breathe in. He trains thus, concentrating the mind. I will breathe out. He trains thus, liberating the mind. I will breathe in. He trains thus, liberating the mind. I will breathe out. He trains thus, reflecting on impermanence. I will breathe in. He trains thus, reflecting on impermanence. I will breathe out. He trains thus, reflecting on fading away. I will breathe in. He trains thus, reflecting on fading away. I will breathe out. He trains thus, reflecting on elimination. I will breathe in. He trains thus, reflecting on elimination. I will breathe out. He trains thus, reflecting on letting go. I will breathe in. He trains thus, reflecting on letting go. I will breathe out. Whenever a monk, when breathing in long, knows I breathe in long, or when breathing out long, he knows I breathe out long, or when breathing in short, knows I breathe in short, or when breathing out short, knows I breathe out short. When he trains thus, experiencing the whole body, I will breathe in. When he trains thus, experiencing the whole body, I will breathe out. When he trains thus, calming the bodily sensations, I will breathe in. When he trains thus, calming the bodily sensations, I will breathe out. On that occasion, the monk resides, reflecting on the body as body, dedicated, clearly comprehending, mindful, having removed craving and displeasure in regard to the world. For what reason? I call this a certain kind of body, monks, that is, breathing in and breathing out. Therefore, monks, on that occasion, the monk resides reflecting on the body as body, dedicated, clearly comprehending, mindful, having removed craving and displeasure in regard to the world. Whenever a monk trains thus, experiencing joy, I will breathe in. When he trains thus, experiencing joy, I will breathe out. When he trains thus, experiencing peacefulness, I will breathe in. When he trains thus, experiencing peacefulness, I will breathe out. When he trains thus, experiencing the mental activity, I will breathe in. When he trains thus, experiencing the mental activity, I will breathe out. When he trains thus, calming the mental activity, I will breathe in. When he trains thus, calming the mental activity, I will breathe out. On that occasion, the monk resides reflecting on feeling as feeling, dedicated, clearly comprehending, mindful, having removed craving and displeasure in regard to the world. For what reason? I call this a certain kind of feeling, monks, that is close attention to breathing in and breathing out. Therefore, monks, on that occasion, the monk resides reflecting on feelings as feelings, dedicated, clearly comprehending, mindful, having removed craving and displeasure in regard to the world. Whenever a monk trains thus, experiencing the mind, I will breathe in. When he trains thus, experiencing the mind, I will breathe out. When he trains thus, gladdening the mind, I will breathe in. When he trains thus, gladdening the mind, I will breathe out. When he trains thus, concentrating the mind, I will breathe in. When he trains thus, concentrating the mind, I will breathe out. When he trains thus, liberating the mind, I will breathe in. When he trains thus, liberating the mind, I will breathe out. On that occasion, the monk resides reflecting on mind as mind, dedicated, clearly comprehending, mindful, having removed craving and displeasure in regard to the world. For what reason? I say, monks, that there is no development of concentration by mindfulness of breathing mindfulness meditation, for one who is muddled and who lacks clear comprehension. Therefore, monks, on that occasion, the monk resides reflecting on mind as mind, dedicated, clearly comprehending, mindful, having removed craving and displeasure in regard to the world. Whenever, a monk trains thus, reflecting on impermanence, I will breathe in. When he trains thus, reflecting on impermanence, I will breathe out. When he trains thus, reflecting on fading away, I will breathe in. When he trains thus, reflecting on fading away, I will breathe out. When he trains thus, reflecting on elimination, I will breathe in. When he trains thus, reflecting on elimination, I will breathe out. When he trains thus, reflecting on letting go, I will breathe in. When he trains thus, reflecting on letting go, I will breathe out. On that occasion, the monk resides reflecting on mental objects as mental objects, dedicated, clearly comprehending, mindful, having removed craving and displeasure in regard to the world. Having seen that with wisdom what is the abandoning of craving and displeasure, the monk is one who looks on closely with equanimity. Therefore, monks, on that occasion, the monk resides reflecting on mental objects as mental objects, dedicated, clearly comprehending, mindful, having removed craving and displeasure in regard to the world. It is, monks, when concentration by mindfulness of breathing mindfulness meditation, is developed and cultivated in this way that it fulfills the 4 foundations of mindfulness.
All right. Thank you, Max. So we'll go over this first part and then we'll move into the next one. So in last week's class, we actually learned about this guidance that the Buddha gives in terms of meditation. And I broke down for you each individual section of this, and I explained to you how I guide you guys in meditation and what you're actually doing. So you can refer back to last week's class, Volume 4, chapters 1 through 10, where I broke this down piece by piece. And the Buddha breaks it down for you here as well, where he's organizing it into the 4 foundations of mindfulness. What the 4 foundations of mindfulness are things that you need to be aware of. And by understanding these 4 things and practicing to have awareness of these 4 things, this is how you actually get to enlightenment, that it clues you in to how discontent feelings are arising in the life cycle that these feelings are taking. That there's these bodily sensations that you experience, then there's feelings that come into the mind, then it affects the condition of the mind, and then there's mental objects. And what the bodily sensations are these are those sensations that you experience prior to the mind becoming discontent. Like if you've experienced certain tingling sensation or tightening in the chest or heart palpitations or heat in your face or pressure in your skull. These are all things that might happen before you get angry or frustrated, for example. But even those conditioned pleasant feelings, you also experience bodily sensations with those too before the mind acquires those pleasant feelings. So there's these bodily sensations that are occurring. And if you are meditating and you're slowing the mind down through focusing on the breath and slowing the breath down, you can really elongate this period of time where the bodily sensations are being experienced, and you can become aware of that. Because what you would ultimately like to do in daily life is where you've cultivated the mind so well that you're aware of these bodily sensations, and as you're starting to observe their arising, prior to the mind becoming angry, you cut it off and let it go as a bodily sensation. And then you've saved yourself from ever having to experience the anger, the frustration, the guilt, the shame, the fear, or some other discontent feeling. So whether it's pleasant feelings, painful feelings, or neither painful nor pleasant, these are conditioned feelings that the mind is basing its inner feelings on some craving, desire, attachment. If you get what you want, you get pleasant feelings. If you don't get what you want, you get painful feelings. And then there's these neither painful nor pleasant feelings. So as long as you allow the mind to get these conditioned pleasant feelings where you're basing your inner feelings on some condition, it's only a matter of time before you get conditioned painful feelings. So if you look outside and you're like, oh, I'm so excited, it's sunny outside, yay, I'm going to go take a shower because I would like to go hiking today. And now you go take a shower and you come out and it's raining. Because your happiness and excitement was based on the condition of the sun, now when that condition changes due to impermanence, your feelings are going to change too. You might get frustrated or angry or irritated or annoyed. So you need to have awareness of these bodily sensations associated with the pleasant feelings, the painful feelings, and the feelings that are neither painful nor pleasant, and attempt to cut off and let go of your discontentedness there. Depending on where you are in your training, you may not be aware of those bodily sensations yet, or you haven't maybe done enough meditation to be observant of them and be able to easily cut them off and let them go. But that's what you would ultimately like to build up to, where you're very aware of those bodily sensations that are happening way before the feeling arises in the mind. Because now once you've got the feeling of something like anger or frustration in the mind, now it's like allowing the water to come into the boat, and you've got a real problem to deal with. With the bodily sensations, if you can cut it off and let it go there, it's like preventing the water from ever coming into the boat. But if this does come into the mind as a feeling, you can cut it off and let it go there too. And that would be the next ideal thing. Ultimately, you would like to be aware of those bodily sensations and get way ahead of the curve and not allow the mind to form these conditioned feelings anymore. That's the rewiring or the retraining of the mind. But if it comes into the mind as a feeling, okay, so be it. Let's try to cut it off and let it go there by redirecting the mind. Same thing with the bodily sensations. You can redirect the mind towards something else. So now if you don't take care of it as a feeling and cut it off and let it go, it's going to start affecting the condition of the mind. If you've ever been angry for a few hours or a few days or maybe a week or two, I'm sure you've experienced this. That's because you weren't aware of the bodily sensations and you didn't cut it off there. You didn't cut it off as a feeling, so now it's affecting the condition of the mind. And then it's going to feed this mental object. What mental object is the deeply rooted container that is in the mind. And there's multiple mental objects that are in the mind. In this case, it's ill will that we're talking about because of anger arising. And if we don't cut it off as a bodily sensation, as a feeling, or the condition of the mind, it's going to feed this container of ill will, and it's going to get more and more deeply rooted in the mind. There's other mental objects like central desire, conceit, things like this. All those 10 fetters are mental objects. So you would like to get your arms around this by blocking off the bodily sensations and cutting off any arising discontentedness there, so you're not experiencing the conditioned feeling, and you retrain and rewire the mind, restraining the mind so that it no longer experiences those conditioned feelings. Then it won't affect the condition of the mind, and it won't form this mental object or feed this mental object. So by you blocking off at the bodily sensations, it's giving you time to now break up the mental objects. And that's what you're doing on this path to enlightenment, is you're working on uprooting these mental objects out of the mind, with things like loving kindness meditation, generosity, and lots of other things that you're learning and practicing. And that's what you're doing to purify the mind. You're trying to purify the mind of these fetters or these taints or these pollutions and get those out of the mind. So if you keep allowing the feelings to come into the mind and you're not observing those bodily sensations and cutting it off and letting it go there, then the mind's going to keep experiencing this conditioning where it's going to keep getting fed in these mental objects, and they're going to get more and more deeply rooted in the mind. So the Buddha's cluing you into this whole process and showing you how breathing mindfulness meditation is helping you to become aware of these bodily sensations. That's this first part here. So what he's saying is when you're focused on the breath, knowing that it's long or short, when you're experiencing the whole body, noticing the body in meditation, and then you're calming the bodily sensations in meditation, this is helping you to develop that first foundation of mindfulness. So if you're noticing like an itch or some kind of bodily sensation in meditation, what you should do is try to not itch it. Just train the mind that it's impermanent and try to cut off the sensation as a bodily sensation. And sometimes you're just going to need to itch it, right? If you're 10, 15, 20 seconds into it. But over time, you can elongate the amount of time that it takes before you get to that point. So doing these aspects of the practice where you're focused on the breath, you're observant of the body, and then whenever any bodily sensations are occurring in meditation, you're calming those bodily sensations, essentially cutting it off and letting it go. And ultimately, that's what you're doing in daily life as well. Then he gets to the next piece where he's talking about developing awareness of the feelings. This is the second foundation of mindfulness. He's talking about when the mind is joyful or peaceful, that just come back to the breath. Don't indulge in that joy. Don't indulge in the peacefulness. When you notice that the mind is moving into the joy and the peacefulness during your meditation or during daily life, don't sit there and get all these pleasant feelings like, oh, wow, look how peaceful my mind is. This is so amazing. Wow, look at me meditating and doing such a great job. Because that's what the conceit, the arrogance is going to want to do. But instead, where you observe that joy and that peacefulness coming into the mind, just know that it's there and bring the mind back to the breath. And just allow the joy and the peacefulness to permeate, but just bring the mind back to the breath. No need to indulge in it. And then when you're noticing mental activity, that's the next part the Buddha is talking about here. This is like when you're having various random thoughts and they're coming up in the mind, and you're having these various random thoughts that's taking your mind off the breath. He's saying, calm the mental activity. That's the cutting off and letting go. In other parts of his teachings, he makes it very clear. He talks about cutting off and letting go. Here, he's just talking about calming the mental activity. But in other parts, he talks about cutting it off and letting it go. So as you're doing this in meditation, you are developing and reflecting on feelings as feelings. You're starting to become aware of the feelings in meditation, not that you're trying to indulge in those feelings. You're trying to cut off and let go and bring the mind back to the breath, but this helps you to develop awareness of feelings so that in daily life you'll be aware when feelings are coming into the mind, which is very important for you as you develop these four foundations of mindfulness. And then developing mind as mind, or reflecting on mind as mind. This is the condition of the mind, knowing the condition of the mind. And this is the awareness that you need to build. So the Buddha is saying in this part of the meditation that when you're experiencing the mind, meaning you're observant of what's going on, you're noticing the mind, and then as you've cut off and let go of those arising mental activity and those thoughts that are coming up and not allowing the mind to indulge in the joy and the peacefulness, now you should gladden the mind. This is like being uplifting the mind. It's not a conditioned feeling. It's just that now that you've let go of the conditioned feelings in meditation, you can uplift the mind and gladden the mind. And then you can also concentrate the mind. This is where you're bringing the mind to the breath and staying focused on a single object and being able to have focus. And this is going to help with liberating the mind. Liberating the mind is making it free of these strong feelings. And that's what you're doing as part of your meditation. And then having developed that, you've developed and are developing the awareness of the condition of the mind, which then helps you in daily life, that when you're observant of the mind, you're like, hey, the mind isn't glad here. It's not uplifted. So then you can take action to uplift the mind in daily life. And then the fourth foundation of mindfulness that he's pointing out to you here is the mental objects, that you reflect on mental objects as mental objects. What he's essentially sharing here is that you know what the bodily sensations are, and you notice those, and you're aware of those, and you have this mindfulness or awareness of them. The same thing with the feelings, the same thing with the condition of the mind, and now the same thing with the mental objects, that you're aware of the ill will, that you're aware of the conceit, you're aware of these deeply rooted containers in the mind, and the Buddha shares those with you in the 10 fetters. And then as you are in meditation and you're experiencing any particular aspect of the mind, he's saying, okay, reflect on impermanence. So say that you're in meditation and you're focused on the breath, and the mind moves off the breath, and you cut it off and you bring it back. And now when you're in meditation, you hear a sound. Maybe a train goes by, or an airplane, or a car, or there's a baby crying somewhere. Just know that that's impermanent. If you're craving silence in your meditation, when you hear sound, you're going to be agitated or annoyed. So when everything is silent and quite quiet, know that that is impermanent. But also when you hear the sound, know that that is impermanent as well, and just remain unaffected in your meditation. And then as you're doing that, you'll experience this fading away of strong feelings, because now you're not allowing the mind to crave and cling, because you understand impermanence and you've let go, and now there's this fading away of strong feelings, which leads to the elimination of strong feelings, where they're actually eliminated from the mind. And then what you're doing is you're focusing on letting go, not allowing the mind to cling and hold on. And this is, you're softening up the mind, because these mental objects are deeply rooted in the mind, and you're trying to soften the mind up so that you can more easily let them go. Right? And this takes time. This isn't just one meditation or 1 week or 1 month that you're developing these 4 foundations of mindfulness. It takes consistent long-term training to build that up. But as you're building that up in meditation, the Buddha is explaining that you've seen wisdom in the abandoning of craving and displeasure. That if you're abandoning craving, then you're also going to experience less and less displeasure or painful feelings, because you no longer have this agreeable contact and disagreeable contact. Your mind is now experiencing equanimity. More and more, you'll start to experience that. The equanimity is the calmness and composure, especially in difficult situations. You should start noticing this coming into the mind. And in this way, he's just kind of summarizing it, is that with concentration in this breathing mindfulness meditation, which I've always taught you, that what you're doing in breathing mindfulness meditation is you're arising mindfulness or awareness of mind, which now you ultimately know it's the 4 foundations of mindfulness that you've been building awareness of, and that you're developing concentration. Those are the 2 wholesome qualities that you're developing when you're in breathing mindfulness meditation. And you're eliminating the unwholesome quality of craving, desire, attachment, which is what the Buddha is explaining to you here, that you're abandoning craving. So I've always shared this, even in the group learning program when I first introduced you to breathing mindfulness meditation, but now you can see the Buddha's own words about this, and then you don't believe it. You see for yourself that it's actually working to improve the mind in this way, that you're developing mindfulness and concentration, and you're eliminating craving. And more specifically, be sure you're starting to develop awareness of the bodily sensations, the feelings, the condition of the mind, and the mental objects. Looks like we have some questions coming in, so let me answer these. Will every mental object have bodily sensations? The mental objects themselves are the pollutions that are in the mind that are then producing the effect where now when you experience contact with craving as condition, you're now going to experience either conditioned pleasant feelings, painful feelings, or neither painful nor pleasant. So the mental objects themselves aren't producing the bodily sensations. It's the craving, desire, attachments. When you get rid of the cravings, desires, attachments, there will no longer be the arising of discontentedness. So you won't have the arising of bodily sensations associated with discontentedness. As your mind eliminates craving, desire, attachment, you'll still have bodily sensation, meaning if somebody touched your skin, you would know it. Or if you have a certain fabric on your skin, or if you had sandpaper on your skin, you would know that it's there. But these bodily sensations that we're talking about here are based on cravings, desires, attachments, and they're preceding any discontentedness that is arising. That you'll feel sensations in the body, you'll feel maybe pressure in the face or the skull, or tingling, or if you've ever been shy and you said, I feel queasy in the stomach or I have butterflies in the stomach, that's the bodily sensation associated with shyness. Or if you've ever been stressed and you feel tension in your neck and in your shoulders, this is because of the stress. So there's different bodily sensations with different feelings, and you'll be able to start cluing into that. And you'll start to see this elongated period, maybe 5 seconds, 8 seconds, where you're experiencing a bodily sensation before you've ever experienced the feeling. And as that bodily sensation is arising, you can notice it, and then boom, it becomes a feeling in the mind. You can feel it enter into the mind. But you can get way ahead of this and cut it off. But it's not the mental objects that are necessarily producing this. It's the cravings, desires, attachments, which some of those mental objects are based in craving, desire, attachment, like sensual desire. That's a mental object that has craving, desire, attachment in it. But it's more directly the cravings, desires, attachments that are producing these bodily sensations to arise, because that's what's arising the discontentedness, and the bodily sensations are just prior to the discontentedness. Looks like Christine has some questions too. If we eliminate all feelings, how can we actually make good decisions? Have learned to use feelings, my gut instincts, as a compass in life. Doesn't that make life very mental? So what you're eliminating here is you're eliminating conditioned feelings. You're not eliminating everything from the mind. You're eliminating conditioned feelings, and this is actually going to help you make wiser decisions. That gut feeling that you're talking about, that's not actually a feeling. That's wisdom. That gut feeling that you're talking about is the bodily sensation associated with some craving, desire, attachment. This is where the unenlightened mind, we don't really understand what's happening. We use these words like a gut feeling, but there's no such thing as a gut feeling, because all the feelings are happening in the mind, and this is a conditioned feeling. So when you eliminate your conditioned feelings, where the mind's not shaken up, going up and down and up and down, you can get to this calmness and composure where the mind's clear and crisp and focused and concentrated. And now with your wisdom, you will make wise decisions about your life. And anything from, what friends to have, what partners to have, where to live, what occupation or livelihood you would like to have, all these different things, you'll make wise decisions. But as long as you're allowing the mind to be shaken up with these conditioned feelings, you're not going to be able to make wise decisions. So by getting rid of these conditioned feelings, now the mind can be uplifted and bright and peaceful and joyful. And now you can use your wisdom to make wise decisions that lead to wholesome outcomes. Looks like Christine has another question here. She says, when we reflect on impermanence of death and a deep sadness comes up that we cannot hold on to anything, not the people, not the smells, visuals, not the body, and even not the mind, do we cut this off too, or do we go through this to train the mind to let go? So if you're doing the reflection on death that I teach, and you're experiencing sadness, that means you're doing it exactly the way that you should, because as you're letting go of the cravings, then you're going to experience painful feelings, because the mind has this craving and clinging, holding on to life, thinking that this life is permanent. And now when you start doing the reflection on death and you start noticing sadness arise, this is because the mind's not getting what it wants, which is this misperception of permanent life. So when you're starting to do the reflection on death and some sadness starts to come into the mind, this means you're doing it properly, and you would like to cut that off and let it go. You're not interested in allowing the mind to have conditioned feelings, but understand that in some situations you might not be able to, depending on where you are in your practice, that it is going to become a feeling in the mind, and it is going to affect the condition of your mind for a few hours or a few days. When I did the reflection on death in my early 20s, I was shaken up about this because I was doing it for my mom, I was doing it for my grandmother. That's where I started with. And it took me, a few hours or a few days to let this go. So you're not going to always be able to cut off and let go, even though I say this is what you would like to do, this is what you're interested in doing. Just understand that your mind may not be able to do that. So what I'm doing is describing the ideal of what you would like to ultimately build up to, and then help you understand that your mind's not always going to be able to do that. But wherever you experience a conditioned feeling, whether it's in meditation or reflecting on death or in daily life, if you're noticing bodily sensations, you automatically know there's a conditioned feeling that's coming. So cut that off and let it go. If it becomes a feeling, okay, try to cut it off and let it go there. If it's affecting the condition of the mind more long term, try to cut it off and let it go there. And always try to retrain the mind so that it's no longer experiencing these conditioned feelings. And that's what's ultimately going to lead to liberation. But even when your mind's liberated, you're not experiencing conditioned feelings, but your mind's now going to be calm and clear and joyful. You're going to have this unconditioned mental states that are just always there. Let me see if we have any questions on Facebook or YouTube. Let's see. Okay, I just see some hellos and stuff like that. That's fine. Hello, everyone. Pleased to see you guys in YouTube. Let's see what we've got in Facebook. Yep, same thing. A couple hellos and peace signs. Okay, so let's continue on with the reading, Max.
4 foundations of mindfulness fulfill the 7 factors of enlightenment. And how, monks, are the 4 foundations of mindfulness developed and cultivated so that they fulfill the 7 factors of enlightenment? Whenever a monk resides reflecting on the body as body, on that occasion unmuddled, mindfulness is established in that monk. Whenever unmuddled mindfulness has been established in a monk, on that occasion the enlightenment factor of mindfulness is aroused by the monk. On that occasion the monk develops the On that occasion, the monk develops the enlightenment factor of mindfulness. On that occasion, the enlightenment factor of mindfulness goes to fulfillment by development in the monk. Residing thus mindfully, he penetrates that teaching with wisdom, examines it, makes an investigation of it. Whenever a monk residing thus mindfully penetrates that teaching with wisdom, examines it, makes an investigation of it. On that occasion, the enlightenment factor of investigation is aroused by the monk. On that occasion, the monk develops the enlightenment factor of investigation. On that occasion, the enlightenment factor of investigation goes to fulfillment by development in the monk. While he penetrates that teaching with wisdom, examines it, makes an investigation of it, his energy is aroused without slackening. Whenever a monk's energy is aroused without slackening, as he penetrates that teaching with wisdom, examines it, makes an investigation of it, on that occasion, the enlightenment factor of energy is aroused by the monk. On that occasion, the monk develops the enlightenment factor of energy. On that occasion, the enlightenment factor of energy goes to fulfillment by development in the monk. When his energy is aroused, there arises in him joy. Whenever joy arises in a monk whose vitality is aroused, on that occasion, the enlightenment factor of joy is aroused by the monk. On that occasion, the monk develops the enlightenment factor of joy. On that occasion, the enlightenment factor of joy goes to fulfillment by development in the monk. For one whose mind is uplifted by joy, the body becomes tranquil and the mind becomes tranquil. Whenever amongst the body becomes tranquil and the mind becomes tranquil, in the monk whose mind is uplifted by joy, on that occasion, the enlightenment factor of tranquility is aroused by the monk. On that occasion, the monk develops the enlightenment factor of tranquility. On that occasion, the enlightenment factor of tranquility to fulfillment by development in the monk. For one whose body is tranquil and who is joyful and the mind becomes concentrated. Whenever monks, the mind becomes concentrated in a monk whose body is tranquil and who is joyful. On that occasion, the enlightenment factor of concentration is aroused by the monk. On that occasion, the monk develops the enlightenment factor of concentration. On that occasion, the enlightenment factor of concentration goes to fulfillment by development in the monk. He becomes one who closely looks on with equanimity at the mind thus concentrated. Whenever a monk becomes one who closely looks on with equanimity at the mind thus concentrated, on that occasion, the enlightenment factor of equanimity is aroused by the monk. On that occasion, the monk develops the enlightenment factor of equanimity. On that occasion, the enlightenment factor of equanimity goes to fulfillment by development in the monk. Whenever a monk resides reflecting on feelings as feelings, mind as mind, mental objects as mental objects. On that occasion, unmuddled mindfulness is established in that monk. Whenever unmuddled mindfulness has been established in a monk, on that occasion, the enlightenment factor of mindfulness is aroused by the monk. On that occasion, the monk develops the enlightenment factor of mindfulness. On that occasion, the enlightenment factor of mindfulness goes to fulfillment by development in the monk. The remaining three foundations of mindfulness should be elaborated as in the case of the first foundation of mindfulness. He becomes one who closely looks on with equanimity at the mind, thus concentrating whenever a monk becomes one who closely looks on with equanimity at the mind, thus concentrated. On that occasion, the enlightenment factor of equanimity is aroused by the monk. On that occasion, the monk develops the enlightenment factor of equanimity. On that occasion, the enlightenment factor of equanimity goes to fulfillment by development in the monk. It is, monks, when the four foundations of mindfulness are developed and cultivated in this way that they fulfill the seven factors of enlightenment.
Okay. So let me first describe the seven factors of enlightenment, and then I'll help you with what the Buddha is doing here, because the Buddha is helping you see how one builds to the next. These seven factors of enlightenment, the way that I suggest that you think about them is they're fine-tuning for the mind. Sometimes people misunderstand them and they think that they're the factors that determine if you are enlightened or not. But these aren't the only things that an enlightened being would be practicing. An enlightened being would be practicing all seven of these at all times. But until you get to enlightenment, you're going to need to invoke these different seven factors at different times. You can think of it like a piece of wood, and you're making a sculpture. And as you're first learning the path, like the three universal truths, the four noble truths, the eightfold path, the five precepts, your meditation practice, and all these other teachings, it's like taking this big piece of wood and you're taking like a hatchet or an axe and you're chopping off big chunks of wood. Like you're chucking off wrong view and wrong intention and wrong speech and wrong action, wrong livelihood, wrong effort, wrong mindfulness, and wrong concentration. You're chucking these off because you're trying to make this beautiful sculpture. And then over time, as you're working on the sculpture, eventually you get to the point where you would like to put the eyelashes or the wrinkles in the skin, and you're going to come in with this really fine razor perhaps, or like an X-Acto knife or something like that. And that's what's going to cut in these really fine wrinkles and eyelashes and hairs on this wooden sculpture. Well, the seven factors of enlightenment are the same way, that when you first get started on the path, you're learning all those basic core teachings and you're needing to bring those up into the mind. And as you do, you ultimately get to a point where you start understanding mindfulness. This is the first foundation of mindfulness. The first of the seven factors of enlightenment. The seven factors of enlightenment start out with mindfulness. And the Buddha shares in other teachings that you should always be practicing mindfulness. As you're waking up in the morning and you're just starting to get your awareness, all day long, and even as you're going to sleep at night, because your thoughts can invade you as you're waking up and as you're going to sleep. So you need to be attentive to the mind with mindfulness or awareness of the mind. And that's why you have those four foundations of mindfulness that you would like to develop in meditation and outside of meditation, so that you have this mindfulness with you at all times. Then there's the enlightenment factor of investigation, of energy and joy. This is what you use to uplift the mind. When the mind is sluggish or lethargic, when it's complacent, you would like to use the enlightenment factor of investigation, where you start investigating his teachings. You start examining his teachings in books and videos, coming to classes like this. This is investigating the teachings. And as you investigate the teachings, you might notice this energy spring up in the mind. What the enlightenment factor of energy is, this is the enthusiasm, the motivation, the initiative, the interest to do something. This is the enlightenment factor of energy. And then what that leads to is it leads to the enlightenment factor of joy, where you get this unconditioned joy. So where you notice the mind is complacent, oftentimes the mind wants to push away meditation, it wants to push away the books, it wants to push away the classes, it just wants to be complacent, dull and lethargic. But what you would like to do is arise effort to do just the opposite, is move into investigating the teachings. Then you arise this energy and you arise this joy. And that's what brings your mind out of the complacent, sluggish state into the middle. Then there's these enlightenment factors of tranquility, of concentration, and equanimity. This is where the Buddha describes in other teachings that when your mind is excited or elated, overactive perhaps, you would like to use the tranquility, the concentration, and the equanimity to bring the mind into the middle, where that tranquility is like peacefulness and a serene mind. You would like to arise that quality to calm the mind down. And then the concentration is having focus, singleness of mind. That's going to help calm the mind. And then also the equanimity, which is calmness and composure, evenness of temper, especially in difficult situations. So you would like to bring these qualities into the mind as you're noticing this excited condition or this overactivity in the mind. That's what's going to calm it down and bring it to the middle. So with mindfulness, you need to be aware, is the mind sluggish and complacent, or is it overactive or excited, or is it in the middle and I'm feeling quite peaceful and quite calm and content? So when you see the mind either sluggish or excited, then you'll know what factors of enlightenment to invoke, and then eventually by the time you get to enlightenment, you'll just be practicing all 7 factors. But that's not what determines whether you're enlightened or not. But these are things that an enlightened being would be practicing, and you would have needed these as you're fine-tuning the mind and bringing it more and more to the middle. And the Buddha here is helping you to see that when you have awareness of the bodily sensations, based on what he was teaching earlier with the meditation, then you're going to have this mindfulness, this unmuddled mindfulness. A muddled mindfulness would be like lots of things in the mind, where the mind is just like constantly bombarded with thoughts. That's not what you're interested in. By the time you train your mind enough in breathing mindfulness meditation, and you get to the point where you can observe the bodily sensations in meditation and outside of meditation, at this point, you've brought your mindfulness to fulfillment, meaning that you've fully developed your mindfulness all the way to the point where it needs to be developed. Because before you get onto this path, we're typically completely unaware of our mind. We don't even know what's wholesome, what's unwholesome, what's in there, what's not in there. We have no idea. We're just plowing through the world, knocking down trees, burning up the forest. We really don't even know what's going on. But as we develop from understanding feelings, because we do tend to understand that in the unenlightened state, and as we're even off this path, we can observe the mind's angry or frustrated, or we might even see the condition of the mind, right? But it's when you're aware of these bodily sensations that you now have developed this unmuddled mindfulness, and it's come to full development. And that's what you're looking to develop. Because once you get there, enlightenment is straight ahead. You just need to keep working and keep restraining the mind. But this mindfulness is then what you're going to use as you observe that the mind becomes complacent or sluggish. And now that's when you start working towards developing the enlightenment factor of investigation. And you start investigating the teachings, which then leads to this energy, where the enlightenment factor of energy starts to arise. And now that's what leads to the enlightenment factor of joy, right? So this is what brings your mind out of that sluggish and complacent state. And now, as you're experiencing the joy, the body and mind are now tranquil. Because if the mind is tranquil, the mind is experiencing that joy, the body is going to then be tranquil as well. You're not going to feel this heaviness in the body that you feel when you're carrying around craving, desire, attachment. That's the burden that's weighing on your shoulders, because it's all happening in the mind. And because your mind is burdened with craving, desire, attachment, it's going to weigh on your shoulders. It's going to weigh on your feet. If you've ever come home from work, or you've ever come home from the end of your day and you feel like you've got cinder bricks on your feet, that's because of the craving, desire, attachment that you're carrying around. But when your mind is uplifted out of that complacent state with investigation, energy, and joy, now the mind and the body are both tranquil. And now you can start developing that enlightenment factor of tranquility, which then leads to the enlightenment factor of concentration, where you're focused and you're able to concentrate on a single object. And now that is what leads to the enlightenment factor of equanimity, where now you can have calmness and composure, evenness of temper, even in a difficult situation. And this is what brings the 7 factors of enlightenment to fulfillment. And you would like to be able to do that, bringing those 7 factors of enlightenment into the mind, whether it's bodily sensations that you're noticing, whether it's feelings, whether it's the condition of the mind, which right here is mind, or whether it's mental objects. As you're noticing those things with mindfulness, then wherever you see your mind complacent or you see it excited, you can bring in the appropriate 7 factors or the 3 factors on either side. But always practicing that mindfulness is what's going to help you to be able to invoke whatever factors of enlightenment you need to invoke. Questions on this? See, I'm not seeing any questions anywhere. So let's go ahead and move to the next one, which is leading to true wisdom and liberation.
7 factors of enlightenment fulfill true wisdom and liberation. How, monks, are the 7 factors of enlightenment developed and cultivated so that they fulfill true wisdom and liberation? Here, monks, a monk develops the enlightenment factor of mindfulness, which is based upon seclusion, freedom from strong feelings, and elimination, maturing in release. He develops the enlightenment factor of investigation, which is based upon seclusion, freedom from strong feelings, and elimination, maturing in release. He develops the enlightenment factor of investigation, which is based upon seclusion. Did I already read that? Sorry.
Yeah, I just stopped it there. It's actually right here.
Okay, sorry. He develops the enlightenment factor of energy, which is based upon seclusion, freedom from strong feelings, and elimination, maturing in release. He develops the enlightenment factor of joy, which is based upon seclusion, freedom from strong feelings, and elimination, maturing in release. He develops the enlightenment factor of tranquility, which is based upon seclusion, freedom from strong feelings, and elimination, maturing in release. He develops the enlightenment factor of concentration, which is based upon seclusion, freedom from strong feelings, and elimination, maturing in release. He develops the enlightenment factor of equanimity, which is based upon seclusion, freedom from strong feelings, and elimination, maturing in release. It is, monks, when the 7 factors of enlightenment are developed and cultivated in this way that they fulfill true wisdom and liberation.
All right, thanks, Max. So here, the 7 factors of enlightenment are leading to true wisdom and liberation. What true wisdom is that you truly understand the teachings of the Buddha in their totality, that you've examined them, you've investigated them, you've independently reflected on them, you've practiced them, you've fully uprooted all the conditions of the mind, all the fetters, all the pollutions. The mind is now enlightened, where it's liberated from strong feelings. You're no longer experiencing the anger, sadness, frustration, irritation, annoyance, guilt, shame, fear, boredom, loneliness, shyness, resentment, jealousy, all of these discontent feelings. Even the slightest little ickiness doesn't exist in the enlightened mind, and you get to that through true wisdom. That's what you're always working towards, is to get to wisdom. And that's why you should never believe any of the teachings in the Buddha, because belief, you don't know what's true or false, so therefore it doesn't lead to wisdom. You would like to independently verify each individual aspect of the teachings. And as you're going from those breathing mindfulness meditation that the Buddha taught to developing the 4 foundations of mindfulness and now practicing those, cutting off and letting go of any discontentedness as bodily sensations, you're starting to restrain the mind and you're starting to retrain the mind. And now that moves into developing the 7 factors of enlightenment, where you're fine-tuning the mind, whether it's complacent or whether it's overactive. And now as this mind starts to develop this true wisdom about all the teachings that the Buddha is sharing with you in their totality, you get to this true wisdom, or sometimes referred to as final knowledge or right wisdom. These are other ways that the Buddha refers to this final knowledge or this true wisdom, that you understand these natural laws of existence that he taught. And this is what leads to your liberation, where you no longer experience these discontent feelings. So this is the progression of that from one to the next to the next. One thing that I'll point out for you here in this particular teaching, where the Buddha is talking about each one of these factors of enlightenment, he's talking about how it matures in release. What you essentially will notice is that as you're developing your mind with breathing mindfulness meditation, with the 4 foundations of mindfulness, the 7 factors of enlightenment, is you'll start to become more and more aware of the various cravings, desires, attachments that you have. And while you're trying to cut off and let them go, it's not going to be just the craving arises once, you get angry and you cut it off and let it go, and it never arises ever again. You're going to have the arising of this craving, your mind gets angry and you cut it off, and it arises again at some other point in time, and you cut it off and you cut it off, and you're having to keep cutting it off and cutting it off. But as you're gradually meditating each day, 2 or 3 times a day, as you're practicing generosity and all these other teachings, all of this matures to the point where the cravings release from the mind. And you can even feel some of the cravings sometimes, where they actually release from the mind, and then all of a sudden the mind becomes joyful and it becomes peaceful and it becomes uplifted. If you've ever been in a really difficult relationship with somebody and you've decided that you're going to split, but yet your mind is like very discontent about this, but nonetheless you guys decided to split, and it might be like a few days or a few weeks or what have you, maybe even a few months, where you're just agitated, you're annoyed, you're just feeling disgruntled, and then you just get to a point where it's like, well, boom, it just releases from the mind. It can be in the day and you actually notice that it releases, or one day you can just wake up and you're just like, wow, I've let this person go. The mind is no longer burdened by this craving of this person that the mind's holding on to. So this is what the Buddha is talking about maturing and release. And as you become more aware of the mind and what's happening in the mind with these cravings, desires, attachments, as you're gradually cutting them off and letting them go and training the mind to let them go, you sometimes can feel the actual release of a certain attachment. So just know that that can occur. Let me see if you guys have any questions on this aspect of what we're sharing today. I don't see any questions in any of the platforms. So this one took us a while to go through, but it was really important to make sure you understood all those. So now we'll go to chapter 12, and this is a different teaching, and I will help you guys understand this one. Is there someone in Zoom who would like to read this one? Okay, I can go ahead and read it. It's chapter 12. It's titled The Suitable Way for Attaining Nibbana, or Enlightenment. This is the first discourse. Monks, I will teach you the way that is suitable for attaining Nibbana, enlightenment. Listen to that and attend closely. I will speak. And what, monks, is the way that is suitable for attaining Nibbana, enlightenment? Here, a monk sees the I as impermanent. He sees forms as impermanent. He sees eye consciousness as impermanent. He sees eye contact as impermanent. He sees as impermanent whatever feeling arises with eye contact as condition, whether pleasant or painful, or neither painful nor pleasant. He sees ear. He sees the ear as impermanent. He sees sounds as impermanent. He sees ear consciousness as impermanent. He sees ear contact as impermanent. He sees as impermanent whatever feeling arises with ear contact as condition, whether pleasant or painful, or neither painful nor pleasant. So this just repeats for all the 6 sense bases. So the nose and odors, all of this is impermanent, as well as the consciousness and the contact and the feelings. The tongue and flavors, and then the body and physical objects, and then the 6th sense base, which is the mind and mental objects. Okay, so you're seeing the mind is impermanent, the mental objects is impermanent, the mind consciousness is impermanent, the mind contact is impermanent, and whatever feeling arises with the mind contact as condition, whether pleasant or painful or neither painful nor pleasant, this is impermanent as well. And the Buddha is saying this, monks, is the way that is suitable for attaining nibbana or enlightenment. So let me break this down for you and help you understand what each part of this is. So here he's talking about the 6 sense bases. The 6 sense bases are involved in that pollution or that fetter, that taint of sensual desire. This is the 4th fetter, and the mind needs to be purified of this sensual desire. And what the mind is doing is it's longing and yearning through these sense bases for agreeable contact. It's craving, it's desiring, it's wanting permanently agreeable contact through the eyes, ears, nose, tongue, the body, and the mind. So if you see agreeable forms through the eyes, then you'll get pleasant feelings. If you see disagreeable forms through the eyes, you will get painful feelings. And then the same thing with sounds through the ears, or odors through the nose, or flavors through the tongue, or physical objects through the body, or mental objects through the mind. So giving you an example of this, if you're sitting at a traffic light and there's a car that pulls up to you and it has some music on, and you're like, oh wow, this is really great music, I like this music, wow, I feel so great, I feel so happy, I feel so wonderful. Well, now you pull up to the next light and somebody else pulls up to you with a different type of music, and because of your craving, desire, attachment, you liked and craved and enjoyed the first one, but the second one you're like, I don't like this, this is horrible, how dare this guy do this, right? You might start getting frustrated or irritated, you might start judging this person, you might start hating this person, right? And this is because the mind's craving. It's craving for permanently agreeable contact through the ears and wanting to hear things that are permanently agreeable. But this isn't possible because of the universal truth of impermanence. You're going to see things that are disagreeable to you. You're going to hear things that are disagreeable. You're going to smell things that are disagreeable. You're going to taste things that are disagreeable. There's going to be physical objects on the body that are disagreeable. And there's going to be certain mental objects that are disagreeable. So the Buddha is helping you to see that these things are all impermanent so that your mind can stop craving it. Because if you understand that these things are impermanent, it can help you to eliminate your craving. Of course, you need breathing mindfulness meditation, generosity, and the other factors on the Eightfold Path. But here you need to be able to see this very clearly and independently verify it. That the I itself, the actual I, is impermanent. And then anything that the I sees, the forms, these are also impermanent. And then he talks about he sees I consciousness as impermanent. What I consciousness is awareness of what you see through the eyes. So the internal sense base is the eyes, ears, nose, tongue, the body, and the mind. That's the internal sense base, is the I. The external sense base is the forms, the sounds, the odors, the flavors, the physical objects, and the mental objects. That's the external sense base. But when the mind becomes aware of what the eye is seeing as a physical form, that's called eye consciousness. So this mug that I'm holding in my hand, this is a physical form. And the eye is seeing that. And then when the mind becomes aware of it, those two things, the eye and the form, now create eye consciousness, where I'm now aware that this is a mug that is in front of me. And now these three things together, the eye, the physical form and the I consciousness or awareness, this is what we call contact. That now the I has come in contact with this mug, because we have the internal sense space, which is the I, we have the physical form, which is the mug, we have the awareness of that, which is I consciousness, and now these three things together, we call that contact, that the I has now contacted with the mug. But all of these things are impermanent, because if you're sitting somewhere and you see a beautiful car come by and it's like, oh my goodness, that is the nicest car. I want that right now. I want to buy it. Let me chase after that, right? Let me get that car. That's what the mind's going to want to do with central desire. Or you see a handsome man or a beautiful woman, or you see something else that the mind desires, right? That you see a brand new pair of shoes when you're walking in the mall. This is the I seeing a physical form. The I becomes aware of it, which is consciousness, and now there's contact. And now if you understand that these things are impermanent and they're not going to give you lasting, permanent satisfaction, then you can feel better about restraining the mind and realizing that, yeah, that's just impermanent. Why am I trying to create these permanent feelings by latching onto this pair of shoes or this brand new car or something like this? So all of these sense bases is doing this. And the more you're aware of this and you independently verify it, don't just believe what I'm sharing, that you can reflect on this and you can practice and you can see. Because in addition to calling these the 6 sense bases, we also refer to them as the 6 doorways to discontentedness. Anytime your mind experiences discontentedness, it's going to come through these 6 doorways. Either the eyes, ears, nose, the tongue, the bodily contact, or the mind. And what's happening with the mind, if you're not familiar with that sense base, is if you're in the present moment and you're thinking about either pleasurable things or painful things that happened in your past, you can experience conditioned feelings in the present moment based on things that happened in the past. That's the mental object. That's the mind thinking about some object in the past. Or say like right now in the present moment, you're at work and you know that 3 weeks from now you're going on vacation or you're going on holiday and you're like, oh man, I just can't wait to go on vacation. Oh, this work is so miserable. I can't stand being here. I just can't wait to go on holiday in 3 weeks. Now you're going to experience discontentedness. You haven't seen anything. You haven't heard anything. You haven't smelled anything. There hasn't been any flavors that came in contact with the tongue. There hasn't been any physical objects that came in contact with the body. This is a mental object. This is the mind longing and yearning, holding on or clinging to something in the past or the future. And as long as your mind keeps doing this, it's going to experience discontentedness. These are the 6 doorways that discontentedness is coming into the mind. So the Buddha teaches to use those 4 foundations of mindfulness as a guard. He teaches this in other teachings, that you guard your 6 doorways to discontentedness. You guard the mind, you protect the mind with mindfulness so that you're aware that when you're going into certain situations that the mind's going to be longing and yearning. As long as it's unenlightened, your mind's going to be longing and yearning through these sense spaces, looking for agreeable and disagreeable contact. Eventually, when you eliminate your cravings, desires, attachments, and those no longer exist in the mind, there won't be agreeable contact and disagreeable contact. It'll just be contact. So if a car pulls up to you with certain music on and you prefer to listen to that music, it's like, oh, wow, okay, there's some music. Interesting. There's some sounds that are coming out of those speakers into the ears. And it's impermanent, so you're not going to cling to it. And then you pull up to the next light and there's another type of music that you don't necessarily prefer, but it's like, all right, well, there's some sounds that are coming out of those speakers into the ears, but you don't allow it to shake up the mind because you know it's not permanent. As soon as the light changes in 3 to 5 minutes, that car is going to be gone and you're not going to hear that music again. So why allow the mind to be frustrated or agitated about this impermanent thing? That why form any kind of feelings about this music when it's impermanent? You're only going to hear it for 3 to 5 minutes. Who cares? That's that person's music. They're blaring their music in the car. Okay, whatever. I'm just going to stay here, maintain my contentedness, maintain my peacefulness, and maintain my joy. Don't allow that impermanent situation to shake up the mind. And that's what the Buddha is cluing you into here. Any questions on this chapter? Okay, I'm not seeing any questions here. So let's move on to the next one. And there's a bunch of them here that are very similar. So I'm just going to kind of go through these because the Buddha is going through the three universal truths. That first one was about impermanence. This one is about discontentedness. He's saying the exact same thing. He's saying essentially what the eye sees is discontentedness because the mind's going to crave permanence. And as long as your mind's craving permanence, then what the eye experiences is discontentedness. And he talks about this about all six sense bases. And then the next one, the third discourse, he's talking about non-self, that the I is not the self. The physical forms that you see is not the self. This I consciousness or this awareness is not self. And then the contact that you experience is not the self. So these are the three universal truths that he's just reminding you that none of this stuff is permanent. It's all impermanent. That none of it is going to lead to contentedness. It's all going to lead to discontentedness. And that it's all not self. It's not who you are as a person. So what you're doing is when you eliminate these conditioned feelings, then you can just enjoy the present moment for what it is. If you're eating that piece of chocolate cake, enjoy it. But then it's done and over with and you're moving off to the next thing. If you're getting a massage and it feels really great, okay, great. You're feeling a massage. Somebody's doing a great job working out all the kinks in your body. Okay, then when it's over and you move on. Or you experience some great music and you're listening to some great music. Okay, you enjoy it in that present moment, but then you move on. You don't allow the mind to cling to it and crave it and yearning for it to be permanent. Okay, so let's see. I saw, Max, you had your hand up. This one here is also very similar. This one, the Buddha just goes through kind of like a question answer situation where he's basically asking the same things and checking in with his students to see if they understand what he taught. So I'll just kind of summarize this one where he says, what do you think, monks? Is the I permanent or impermanent? And of course, his students say, impermanent, venerable sir. What is impermanent discontentedness or contentedness? Well, it's discontentedness because the unenlightened mind is going to crave permanence. So when the unenlightened mind experiences impermanence, it's going to then have discontentedness. So that's what he's checking in to make sure they understand. What is impermanent discontentedness and subject to change fit to be regarded thus? This is mine, this I am, this is myself. So is any of these material objects around you, do they belong to you? Are they yours? Is this who you are? Are these clothes yours? Is this me? Is this who I am? Is this car that you drive? Is this motorcycle you drive? Is this hairstyle that you have? Is any of this stuff you and who you are? No, it's not. So you need to be able to see that more and more clearly, that none of this stuff is you. It doesn't belong to you because it's all impermanent. If it belonged to you, you'd be able to take it with you when you die. So even though you might own your house, you might own your car, you might have children, you might have this particular body, this body isn't yours. You're just kind of renting it. You're kind of like a tenant that's just occupying this body for now, but eventually you'll be out of there. You're not going to be with this body anymore. So none of this stuff is you. None of it belongs to you. None of it's mine. Are forms permanent or impermanent? Is I consciousness permanent or impermanent? Is I contact permanent or impermanent? Is any feeling that arises with the eye contact as condition either pleasant or painful or neither painful nor pleasant, permanent or impermanent? Well, all of this stuff is impermanent, whether it's forms that you see with the eye, whether it's ear, nose, tongue, the body, the mind, all of this stuff, everything you come in contact with, it's all impermanent. What is impermanent discontentedness or contentedness? It's discontentedness, right? If you crave it and you cling, it's going to produce discontentedness. What is impermanent discontentedness and subject to change fit to be regarded thus? This is mine, this I am, this is myself? No, venerable sir. So none of this stuff is you, right? So now we get into seeing thus, so essentially seeing this wisdom and understanding this wisdom. Monks, the instructed noble disciple experiences a fading away of strong feelings towards the I, towards forms, a fading away of strong feelings towards I consciousness, a fading away of strong feelings towards eye contact, a fading away of strong feelings towards whatever feeling arises with eye contact as condition, whether pleasant or painful, or neither painful nor pleasant. So as you let go of your cravings, desires, attachments, realizing that all this stuff is impermanent, and you're doing your breathing, mindfulness, meditation, your generosity, and all these other things, you start knocking down the craving, and now the strong feelings start to fade away because you start understanding that all this stuff is impermanent. You're no longer choosing to cling and hold on to it, wanting it to be permanent. And then all of this was explained in the same way with all the other sense bases, the ears, nose, tongue, the body, the mind, okay? And now, experiencing a fading away of strong feelings, he becomes free from strong feelings. So there's this gradual diminishing of strong feelings, and then eventually you get to the point where the mind is completely free, where it's liberated from these strong feelings. Through freedom from strong feelings, his mind is liberated. It's free, it's enlightened. When it is liberated, there comes the knowledge it is liberated. So when you know that it's been 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, and you haven't experienced any strong feelings, those discontent feelings, you'll know your mind is liberated. You'll have the knowledge that it's liberated. Nobody needs to tell you whether you're enlightened or unenlightened. Because if you've worked this path really closely and you're working on those 10 fetters and all the other aspects of the path and you're working to eliminate them, you're going to know when your mind's liberated. In fact, you're going to get periods of time where you're going to go 3 months having not experienced any discontentedness whatsoever. And then boom, you're going to get some discontentedness. And then you'll experience another 3 months or 4 months or 6 months. And then boom. But it's going to be very minimal and you're going to know exactly what it is and you're going to be able to handle it right away, right? And then this period of time elongates more and more. So when you get to 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, and you notice that you haven't had any discontentedness, there is the knowledge that yes, the mind's liberated, and you'll know that. And then having liberated the mind, you'll understand that destroyed is birth. Because not only have you gotten to enlightenment and your mind is peaceful, calm, serene, and content with joy, but you also know that the condition that causes rebirth has been eliminated. Because craving, desire, attachment is what causes discontentedness, but that craving, desire, attachment is also what causes rebirth as well. So when you eliminate your cravings, desires, attachments to eliminate discontentedness, you're also eliminating continually coming back into the world over and over. So you'll know that destroyed is birth, that you'll no longer be reborn because you've lived this holy life, that you've done what had to be done. You've done the training. You've learned the teachings. You deeply investigated and transformed the mind. There's no more for this state of existence. You will never exist in the cycle of rebirth ever again. The Buddha leaves the teaching undeclared about once you attain enlightenment, what happens next. He leaves that as an undeclared teaching. If you don't get to enlightenment, there's continuous rebirth in the cycle of rebirth. But if you get to enlightenment, there's no more for this state of existence, meaning in the cycle of rebirth. But he never said that there is no existence after enlightenment. This is a big misunderstanding in the Buddhist world, is that people think that once you get to enlightenment, you no longer exist anymore. But this isn't what the Buddha taught. He taught that if you don't get to enlightenment, you will exist in the cycle of rebirth. If you get to enlightenment, you won't exist in the cycle of rebirth, but he left it as an undeclared teaching of what happens next, of whether there even is something next. He didn't say there is something next or there isn't. He just left it as an undeclared teaching. And then finally, he says this is a way suitable for attaining enlightenment, because you're going to need to know these things. So it looks like, Max, you might have a question.
Yes, sir. What is that meant by when he says the holy life has been lived? That's just like the lifetime that you have attained enlightenment?
Yes, in this life. So let's just say, like, when you first started out life, you didn't know these teachings, and you start doing unwholesome things. But then as you start cluing into what's happening and you start building wisdom, you start transforming your mind. And say by the age of 30, 35, 45, 50, 65, whatever, you end up getting to enlightenment. So now you've lived the holy life. You've done what had to have been done. You trained your mind. It's not that your entire life was holy, but you've lived a life that led to holiness, where you are now, having purified the mind, uprooted all the unwholesomeness, and now you're only making wholesome decisions.
Understood. Thank you, sir.
Yeah, you're welcome. Let's see if we have any questions on Facebook or Zoom. I'm sorry, Facebook or YouTube. Nope, I don't see any there. So we should be able to go to this next chapter, which is 16. Max, I saw you had your hand up. If you would like to read this one, you're welcome to.
Yes, sir. Dispelling the contact. Monks, consciousness comes to be based on two things. And how, monks, does consciousness come to be based on two things? Consciousness is based on the I and forms. There arises I consciousness. The I is impermanent, changing, becoming otherwise. Forms are impermanent, changing, becoming otherwise. Thus, these two things are moving and fluctuating, impermanent, changing, becoming otherwise. I consciousness is impermanent, changing, becoming otherwise. The cause and condition for the arising of I consciousness is also impermanent, changing, becoming otherwise. When, monks, I consciousness has arisen based on a condition that is impermanent, how could it be permanent? The meeting, the encounter, the combining of these three things is called eye contact. Eye contact, too, is impermanent, changing, becoming otherwise. The cause and condition for the arising of eye contact is also impermanent, changing, becoming otherwise. When, monks, eye contact has arisen based on a condition that is impermanent, how could it be permanent? Contacted, monks, one feels. Contacted, one craves. Contacted, one perceives. Thus, these feelings, too, are moving and fluctuating, impermanent, changing, becoming otherwise. Similar discourses were recited in the case of ear consciousness, nose consciousness, tongue consciousness, body consciousness, and mind consciousness. Independence on the ear and sounds, there arises ear consciousness. Independence on the nose and odors, there arises nose consciousness. Independence on the tongue and flavors, there arises tongue consciousness. Independence on the body and physical objects, there arises body consciousness. Independence on the mind and mental objects, there arises mind consciousness. The ear, nose, tongue, body, and mind are impermanent, changing, becoming otherwise. Mental objects are impermanent, changing, becoming otherwise. Thus, two things are moving and fluctuating, impermanent, changing, becoming otherwise. Mind consciousness is impermanent, changing, becoming otherwise. The cause and condition for the arising of mind consciousness is also impermanent, changing, becoming otherwise. When, monks, mind consciousness has arisen based on a condition that is impermanent, how could it be permanent? The meeting, the encounter, the combining of these three things is called mind contact. Mind contact, too, is impermanent, changing, becoming otherwise. The cause and condition for the arising of mind contact is also impermanent, changing, becoming otherwise. When, monks, mind contact has arisen based on a condition, what is impermanent, could it be permanent? Contacted, monks, one feels. Contacted, one craves. Contacted, one perceives. Thus, these things, too, are moving and fluctuating, impermanent, changing, becoming otherwise. It is in such a way, monks, that consciousness comes to be based on two things.
Okay, thank you, Max. So here, this is the same thing that I mentioned previously when we were looking at eye consciousness and eye contact and all the other sense bases as well. And the Buddha is just explaining it to you here that the internal sense base and the external sense base, having awareness of that, is the eye consciousness, the nose consciousness, the ear consciousness, and so forth and so on. And then these three things is what is called contact. So the eyes seeing a form, having awareness of that, these three things is called contact. So we've already discussed this. If you guys have questions, let me know. Okay, not seeing any questions here. So let's move on to chapter 17. I guess I'll go ahead and read this one. We can rotate Max. So here, this is titled Direct Development of the Noble Eightfold Path. Monks, when one knows and sees the I as it actually is, when one knows and sees forms as they actually are, when one knows and sees I consciousness as it actually is, when one knows and sees eye contact as it actually is, when one knows and sees as it actually is the feeling felt as pleasant or painful, or neither painful nor pleasant, that arises with eye contact as condition, then one is not inflamed by craving for the I, for forms, for eye consciousness, for eye contact, for the feeling felt as pleasant or painful, or neither painful nor pleasant, that arises with eye contact as condition. When one resides uninflamed by craving, unfettered, unobsessed, reflecting on danger, then the five aggregates affected by clinging are diminished for one in the future, and one's craving, which brings renewal of existence, is accompanied by excitement and desire, and excitement in this or that are abandoned. One's bodily and mental troubles are abandoned. One's bodily and mental torments are abandoned. One's bodily and mental fevers are abandoned. And one experiences bodily and mental peacefulness. The view of a person such as this is right view. His intention is right intention. His effort is right effort. His mindfulness is right mindfulness. His concentration is right concentration. But his bodily action, his verbal speech, and his livelihood have already been well purified earlier. Thus, this Noble Eightfold Path comes to fulfillment in him by development. When he develops this Noble Eightfold Path, the four foundations of mindfulness also come to fulfillment in him by development. The body sensations, the feelings, the mind, the mental objects. The four right kinds of striving also come to fulfillment in him by development. This is right effort. The four bases of spiritual power also come to fulfillment in him by development. This is also known as mental power, initiative, energy, the mind, and investigation. The five sense bases also come to fulfillment in him by development. The eyes, ears, nose, tongue, the body. The five powers also come to fulfillment in him by development. This is confidence, energy, mindfulness, concentration, and wisdom. The seven factors of enlightenment also come to fulfillment in him by development. This is mindfulness, investigation, energy, joy, tranquility, concentration, and equanimity. These two things, serenity and insight, occur in him combined evenly together. He fully understands by direct knowledge or experience those things that should be fully understood by direct knowledge or experience. He abandons by direct knowledge or experience those things that should be abandoned by direct knowledge or experience. He develops by direct knowledge experience those things that should be developed by direct knowledge or experience. He realizes by direct knowledge those things that should be realized by direct knowledge. All of the below were restated as above. So he repeats this for the ear, nose, tongue, the body, the mind. And then finally, he shares, these are the things that should be realized by direct knowledge or experience. So here, this is where the Buddha is helping you to understand that you need to develop the Eightfold Path. He talks about this in all of his other teachings, or I should say a lot of his other teachings. The Eightfold Path is this core central teaching that other things plug into, that this is your life practice, the Eightfold Path. And he's talking about how to develop that in help you to move forward. What he typically teaches for a brand new student is to focus on the moral conduct. Once you understand right view and you're starting to establish right view, which is the Four Noble Truths, is he teaches you to focus on right speech, right action, and right livelihood. This is the moral conduct, because as long as you're out in the world and you're causing harm through your moral conduct, you're going to have to deal with all that harm coming back because of the natural law of karma. So you really need to work on cleaning up your moral conduct of right speech, right action, and right livelihood, using the 5 precepts to help you with that as well. So that's where a person usually will first start, is developing right view with the Four Noble Truths and then working on their moral conduct. And then he gets to a point where he says, having done that, then as this person has right view, and now there's right intention, right effort, right mindfulness, and right concentration. This is the wisdom section in the mental discipline section. So even though it's organized as wisdom, moral conduct, mental discipline, the moral conduct is what he suggests people to focus on first, and then develop your aspects of wisdom and the mental discipline. And that's when the Eightfold Path comes to fulfillment and development, when you have all of these factors fully developed. But it does help to kind of break it down, and you're actually doing a lot of these things all at once. You're not just doing one before you lead to the other. But if you really focus in on that moral conduct as you're first getting started, this will really, really help you to knock down your unwholesome karma, those unwise decisions. So then he talks about all these other things, that after you've developed your Eightfold Path, that then you start working on all these other things. And I've put the details in here so that you could see what these things are. And then I teach these in the various books and the various classes and things like that. And then as you develop all of those things, this is what leads to serenity and insight. The serenity is the calmness. The insight is the wisdom or the knowledge. This is what leads to that. And now with your direct knowledge or experience, you'll know what is wholesome and what is unwholesome. And the Buddha is saying with that direct experience and that direct knowledge, that you essentially abandon what is unwholesome and you arise what is wholesome. And you understand that the 6 sense bases are going to be constantly working against you in this regard, because your mind is going to be constantly craving through these sense bases, wanting agreeable contact to get pleasant feelings. And then when you don't get that, you're going to experience disagreeable contact, which then leads to the painful feelings. Any questions on this chapter? Okay, I'm not seeing any questions here. So now we'll move on to the next one, which is chapter 18.
The no coming or going, no passing away or arising. And on that occasion, the perfectly enlightened one was instructing, urging, rousing, and encouraging the monk with discussion of the teachings concerned with liberation. The monks, receptive, attentive, focusing their entire awareness, lending ear, listening to the teachings. Then, on realizing the significance of that, the perfectly enlightened one on that occasion exclaimed, "One who is dependent has wavering. One who is independent has no wavering. There being no wavering, there is calm. There being calm, there is no yearning. There being no yearning, there is no coming or going. There being no coming or going, there is no passing away or arising. There being no passing away or arising, there is neither a here nor a there, nor a between the two. This, just this, is the end of stress."
Okay, thank you, Max. So here, the Buddha is in discussion with his students about the teachings that lead to liberation, that lead to enlightenment. And then he shares this thing here where he says, one who is dependent has wavering. Dependent is craving, desire, attachment. If you're attached and you have cravings, then you're going to waver in your decisions. So if you make a certain decision and then you start wavering in that decision, that's because your mind's contemplating cravings and trying to figure out, should I do this or not? If you're just trying to figure out what you're supposed to be doing and what decision you'd like to make, there you're thinking about it. But once you make a decision and then you start wavering back and forth on that decision, that means you haven't really thoroughly thought out your decision. So the mind might waver about certain things. So that's because of craving, desire, attachment. But when their mind doesn't have cravings, desires, attachments, there's not going to be any wavering, because you'll think through about what decision you would like to make. You'll make a decision, and then your mind knows that that's the absolute best decision because there wasn't any cravings involved in making the decision. So therefore you won't waver on that. When there's no wavering, the mind can be calm. You'll know that you 100% made the right decision, that this was a wise decision. You don't have to be shaken up at all because you know that it was a wise decision and there's not going to be any wavering on that. When the mind's calm, there's no yearning, because if there's craving, desire, attachment, that's the yearning, then the mind's going to be uncalm. But if the mind is calm, then you're not going to feel the mind longing and yearning through these sense bases. So with the mind being calm, then there is no yearning at all. There being no yearning, there's no coming and going. This is where, if you've ever been at home, for example, and you just feel like you just can't be there. You got to go on vacation, or you got to go to a friend's house, or you got to go somewhere else. You just can't be in one spot. Your mind has to always be somewhere else. It's kind of like the grass is always greener on the other side. You can't just be peaceful and content and joyful in one spot and where you're at. The mind is always wanting something else. If you're at home, you feel like you got to go to the store. You just got to go outside. You can't just stay at home and be content. There's this coming and going. So if there is no craving, desire, attachment, if there's no yearning, then there's no coming and going. You can just be perfectly content wherever you're at. You can be perfectly joyful no matter where you're at. There being no coming and going, there's no passing away and arising. The passing away and arising is the impermanence. That if there's no coming and going, that's because there's no cravings, desires, attachments. If there's no cravings, desires, attachments, then there's no impermanent feelings in the mind. But as long as there's craving, desire, attachments, there's going to be these discontent feelings of conditioned pleasant feelings, painful feelings, and neither painful nor pleasant. So therefore, there's going to be impermanent feelings. There's going to be arising, changing, and fading away. But when you've eliminated those cravings, desires, attachments, and you're perfectly content and peaceful and joyful wherever you're at, there is no arising, changing, and fading away. The mind is permanently in this mental state of enlightenment where you're experiencing the permanent qualities of peace, calm, serenity, and contentedness with joy. So there is no passing away or arising. There being no passing away and arising, there is neither a here nor a there, nor between the two. This is the same thing, that you're not just feeling like you have to go here, I have to go there, I have to run over here, I have to run over there, I have to do this, I have to do that. Your mind isn't running around like that. And that's why the Buddha says just this is the end of stress. So if you ever feel like you're running around in circles, or you're running from one place to the next, to the next, to the next, just slow down. There's too much craving there. Just slow down. You don't have to get everything done today, right? So if you feel like you're just go, nose to the grindstone, even though everyone else around you might be doing that, if you live in that type of culture, that doesn't mean you need to do that. Because if you continue to do that, then you're going to continue to have stress and anxiety and all these other discontent feelings. But if you can eliminate those cravings, desires, attachments, then you can just gradually go through your day, enjoying each individual situation, and just handle each thing step by step in the present moment. And that's how you eliminate the stress and this anxiety and the discontent feelings. Any questions on this? All right, I'm not seeing any questions here. So let's move on to the next one, which is chapter 19. This is titled, There Is No You There. And I can't pronounce the many of the students' names of the Buddha, so I'm just going to refer to this as student. Then Bahaya, maybe, then student, when for you there will be only the seen in reference to the seen, only the heard in reference to the heard, only the sensed in reference to the sensed, only the recognized in reference to the recognized. Then, student, there is no you in connection with that. When there is no you in connection with that, there is no you there. When there is no you there, You are neither here nor there, nor between the two. This, just this, is the end of stress. So what he's describing in this first paragraph is he's describing what I mentioned towards the beginning of class, is that as long as you have craving, desire, attachment in the mind, you're going to have agreeable contact and things that you see agreeable, and you'll get pleasant feelings when you get that agreeable contact. And you're going to see things as disagreeable, and you're going to get painful feelings when you have that disagreeable contact. But when you eliminate craving, desire, attachment, there's no longer agreeable or disagreeable. It's just contact. So that's what the Buddha is saying here, is that there's only the seen in reference to the seen. So if you see something, it's just a physical form. It doesn't have to be agreeable or disagreeable. It's only agreeable or disagreeable because you have craving in there. You're wanting things to be a certain way, and you're wanting to see things a certain way. So if you see a mom walking down the street with a child holding their hand, that might be agreeable to you. And it's like, that's so lovely. Wow, look at that. Oh, I'm so glad that the mom's walking with her child so nicely. But then you turn the corner and you see a parent maybe slap their child, and now this is disagreeable to you because you have craving in the mind, wanting everything to be a certain way. But when you understand that this is just contact, it's just things that you're seeing, or there's just herd in reference to the herd. So if you hear that music that pulls up next to you, it's just a sound. It doesn't have to be agreeable or disagreeable. It's just a sound. And you can get to the same thing when somebody speaks to you in polite, kind, friendly, respectful ways. It's just a sound. And you might say, thank you, I appreciate your kind words, or whatever you say. But then when somebody says something degrading or disparaging, it's just a sound. That's all it is. It's not anything in reference to you. It's just heard. It's just sounds. That's all it is. And the same thing with sensed in reference to the sensed, and recognized in reference to the recognized. That you don't have to take all this meaning about each individual contact through these sense bases. You can just understand that it's just a sound, or it's just a physical form. And when you understand this, then there is no you in connection with that. So when you hear something and somebody says something that is complimentary and there's no you here, then it's just like, oh, thank you for your kind words. They're not talking about me because there's no me here. So if somebody compliments this being that we refer to as David, I'm just going to thank them for their kind words because they're just speaking very kindly. And I appreciate that when people are practicing the teachings well. But then when somebody says something degrading or disparaging, they're not talking about me either. There's no me here. They're just having speech that is unwise and that's unfortunate. I'm not going to thank them for it. I'll probably just smile and move on. But there's no painful feelings related to it because there's no you in connection with that. When they say something degrading or disparaging, there's no you. There's no you there. So there's no way your mind can be shaken up when you eliminate this personal existence view and you realize that there is no you. There's no you there, is what the Buddha is saying. Right? So when you hear these different things, either complimentary or degrading or disparaging, if there's no you here, then you won't take it to heart, that you can just understand that it's just sound. There's just the herd in reference to the herd. And then when there's no you there, then there's neither here nor there nor between the two, that you don't, there's nothing anywhere. It's just the physical body. It's just the mind. You're just hearing sounds. You're seeing forms. You're, recognizing certain things in the world, but that's it. None of this stuff is you. It doesn't belong to you. It's just all impermanent. And this is the end of stress. Because if you're taking on meaning when somebody says something impolite, unkind, unfriendly, disrespectful, if your mind's getting shaken up, that's because there's still a you here and you're taking that to heart. But when you understand that there is no you here, and that's just sounds, that's all it is. It's just sounds coming out of someone's mind or someone's mouth because of what's in their mind. And you don't have to take exception to it. You don't have to be upset and shaken up by it. I'm going to check to see if there's any questions here. And then we've got one more chapter. Okay. Would you like to read this one, Max?
Yes, sir. Merely the seen. Although, Venerable Sir, I am old, aged, burdened with years, advanced in life, come to the last stage, Let the perfectly enlightened one teach me the teachings in brief. Let the fortunate one teach me the teachings in brief. Perhaps I may understand the meaning of the perfectly enlightened one's statement. Perhaps I may become an heir to the perfectly enlightened one's statement. What do you think, student? Do you have any craving, desire, or attachment for those forms recognizable by the eye that you have not seen and never saw before, that you do not see and would not think might be seen? No, Venerable Sir. Do you have any craving, desire, or attachment for those sounds recognizable by the ear, for those odors recognizable by the nose, for those flavors recognizable by the tongue, for those physical objects recognizable by the body, for those mental objects recognizable by the mind that you have not recognized and never recognized before, that you do not recognize and would not think might be recognized? No, Venerable Sir. Here, student, regarding things seen, heard, sensed, and recognized by you, in the seen there will be merely the seen. In the heard there will be merely the heard. In the sensed there will be merely the sensed. In the recognized there will be merely the recognized. When, student, regarding things seen, heard, sensed, and recognized by you, in the seen there will be merely the seen. In the heard there will be merely the heard. In the sense there will be merely the sensed. In the recognized there will be merely the recognized. Then, student, you will not be by that. When, student, you are not by that, then you will not be therein. When, student, you are not therein, when you will be neither here nor beyond nor in between the two. This itself is the end of discontentedness. I understand in detail, Venerable Sir, the meaning of what was stated by the perfectly enlightened one in brief. Having seen a form with mindfulness muddled, attending to the pleasing sign, one experiences it with an obsessed mind and remains tightly holding to it. Many feelings flourish within, originating from the visible form, craving and annoyance as well, by which one's mind becomes disturbed. For one who accumulates discontentedness, thus, nibbana is said to be far away. Having heard a sound with mindfulness muddled, having smelt an odor with mindfulness muddled, having tasted a flavor with mindfulness muddled, having touched a physical object with mindfulness muddled, having recognized a mental object with mindfulness muddled. For one who accumulates discontentedness thus, nibbana is said to be far away.
Let me teach this, Max. So, thank you. We'll go on after this. So what the Buddha is doing here is he's being asked questions and talking to a student who's really old. This is Mahalankaputta. I know how to pronounce this one. This student. So the Mahalankaputta is being asked by the Buddha, do you have any craving, desire, attachment for any of these things through the sense bases? Eyes, ears, nose, tongue, the body, and the mind. And he's saying, no, Venerable Sir, I don't have any of those cravings. And then ultimately, the Buddha is saying what I was just sharing is that, okay, whatever you see, hear, sense, or recognize, it's just merely what you saw, what you heard, what you, recognized. There's no need to take, any pleasure in that or pain in that. It's just what you saw, you heard, you sensed, and you recognized. There's no you there, right? So the Buddha is saying, okay, this is how you get to the end of discontentedness. But he says, having seen a form with mindfulness muddled, meaning that your mind is cluttered and you don't have clear awareness of mind, and attending to its pleasing signs. So if you see something with the eyes, you hear something with the ears, you smell, you taste, you have bodily contact with the mind. If you attend to its pleasing signs, meaning you grasp for the pleasure in this object, or you welcome and invite this into the mind. The Buddha uses this language in other discourses. Then one experiences it with an obsessed mind. That's the craving, desire, attachment, that the mind becomes obsessed about this thing. And you have experienced this before, that once you indulge in these pleasant feelings and you start to observe these pleasant experiences, that then the mind becomes obsessed. Like, I just can't wait to get back and taste that taco again. I just can't wait to see that person again. I just can't wait to get back in my car again. My brand new car, it smells so great. I just can't wait to drive it again, right? And this is because the mind remains holding it tightly. And now as you're doing that, there's many feelings that flourish within the mind. There's the originating from the visible form, that you saw this physical form. And then, of course, we're talking about all the sense bases, not just the eyes. Then there's craving that arises. And because of that craving, there's annoyance as well, right? And now by which one's mind becomes disturbed. So it's becoming discontent. And now, for one who accumulates discontentedness, the Buddha is saying that you're far away from enlightenment. So you shouldn't just allow the mind to accumulate this discontentedness by welcoming in these pleasant signs and features and inviting in the pleasantness of all these impermanent objects. And that's where you need to learn how to just enjoy it for the moment and then just move on and let it go. Don't keep clinging to it and holding to it. So anything you experience through these 6 sense bases, don't allow the mind to cling to it. Just enjoy it for the moment and then move on. And now we hear how to experience this with a better, well-trained mind that is close to enlightenment. You can go from here, Max.
Okay. When firmly mindful, one sees a form. One is not inflamed by craving for forms. One experiences it with an unaffected mind and does not remain holding it tightly. One fares mindfully in such a way that even as one sees the form, and while one undergoes a feeling, discontentedness is exhausted, not building up. For one dismantling discontentedness, thus, Nibbana is said to be close by. When firmly mindful, one hears a sound. One is not inflamed by craving for sounds. When firmly mindful, one smells an odor. One is not inflamed by craving for odors. When firmly mindful, one tastes a flavor. One is not inflamed by craving for flavors. When firmly mindful, one touches a physical object. One is not inflamed by craving for physical objects. When firmly mindful, one recognizes a mental object. One is not inflamed by craving for mental objects. For one, diminishing discontentedness, thus, Nibbana is said to be close by.
Okay, so let me pick up on this one. So this is the Buddha describing what you should be doing in order to get to enlightenment, which is having this mindfulness. That's what I was talking about earlier, where mindfulness is the guard, that you're guarding your 6 doorways of discontentedness with mindfulness and awareness of mind. When one is not inflamed by those cravings, meaning when you have the mindfulness, you can see your mind longing and yearning through the sense bases. You're in the mall, you see the mind longing and yearning for that pair of shoes. You can see it, you can observe it. You're not inflamed by it, and you can restrain the mind and pull it back. So one experiences it with an unaffected mind. So you might go over to the store, you might look at the shoes, you might check them out, you might think it through. Do I really need this pair of shoes? What do I need? Okay, I've got 30 pairs of shoes at home, I don't really need another pair. Or the shoes that I'm wearing now, I've only got 2 or 3 pairs at home. This one's about to wear out. Maybe I should go ahead and buy this new one. So you experience it with an unaffected mind. Whatever decisions you make, you're not doing it with longing and yearning. You're not obsessed with it. You're not inflamed by this craving. You're experiencing this experience, whether it's a piece of chocolate cake or shopping or looking at a beautiful view. You're doing it and you're enjoying it, but your mind's unaffected in terms of these conditioned feelings. You're not experiencing conditioned, pleasant, painful, or neither painful nor pleasant, but you can thoroughly enjoy that experience and then just move on, because one does not remain holding tightly to it, right? You can just easily move on. One fares mindfully in such a way, because you're using the mindfulness to guard the mind, that even as one sees a form and while one undergoes a feeling, discontentedness is exhausted, not built up. So you're diminishing and degrade, or you're declining. The discontentedness is fading away. That's what he's talking about here, is that you're working to knock it down. So if you observe a discontent feeling starting to arise, that you cut it off, you restrain the mind. And for one who's dismantling discontentedness in this way, he's saying nibbana is close by, right? You're making your way to enlightenment. So where you observe those bodily sensations, you cut those off and let them go. This is dismantling the discontentedness, not allowing the mind to form these conditioned feelings. So now you're retraining the mind to no longer experience conditioned feelings. And then he goes through and talks about all the other sense bases in the same way. And then he finishes it up with this.
It is in such a way, Venerable Sir, that I understand in detail the meaning of what was stated by the perfectly enlightened one in brief. Good, Maluk. I'll just say student. It is good that you understand in detail the meaning of what was stated by me in brief. The Buddha here repeats the prior verses in full. It is in such a way, student, that the meaning of what was stated by me in brief should be understood in detail. Then the venerable student departed, dwelling alone, withdrawn, diligent, dedicated, and determined, and the venerable student became one of the arahants.
Okay, thank you, Max. So here, this student, Mahalankinputa, he was not quite yet enlightened yet, but he was very close, because he was talking about various things that he was not having craving, desire, attachment for. But by the end of this conversation, and he goes off on his own, he ultimately gets to enlightenment at this point. And for those of you guys that might be older in age, this is a great simile for you, because here you can see Mahalankinputa says, I am old, aged, burdened with years, advanced in my life, come to the last stage, right? But yet he got to enlightenment, right? So sometimes students ask me like, gosh, I'm 70 years old, David, I'm just starting to learn with you. Can I really get to enlightenment? Or, I'm 50 or 60 years old. Can I really get to enlightenment? Yes, you can. And here's a great example of that someone who was advanced in age, that he was able to get to enlightenment. So anytime you decide to learn and practice the teachings is a wonderful time to learn and practice. The earlier you choose to learn and practice in your life, the better, because you can get to enlightenment and enjoy the rest of your life with a peaceful and joyful mind. Like the Buddha, he got to enlightenment at the age of 35. So he got to enjoy the last 45 years of his life with that peace and joy. But if you get to enlightenment at the age of 35, 45, 55, 65, if you get to enlightenment 1 year before death and you get to experience the last year of your life with peacefulness and joy, wonderful. Even if you get to enlightenment in the last 3 minutes of your life, wonderful. You still got to enlightenment. You're not going to experience rebirth. So continue to learn, continue to practice. These are some of the teachings that you need to learn and that you need to understand. Today, really focused in on development of meditation, the 4 foundations of mindfulness, the 7 factors of enlightenment, and the 6 sense bases, and talking about those in detail. So these are all things that you will need to learn in order to get to enlightenment. What questions do you guys have? It looks like Max has his hand up. Go ahead, Max.
What was the average lifespan of the people when Buddha was alive?
I don't know what the average lifespan is, but the Buddha lived until 80, which I think for that period of time, it was probably quite a long life. But I'm not sure what the average lifespan was during that lifetime.
Okay, I was just curious. Thank you, sir.
Yep, you're welcome. Let me see if there's any questions on any of our other platforms. I'm not seeing any there. So what I'll do then is just end class by thanking all of you for joining and reminding you that next week we're going to be in chapters 21 through 30. And you can read this beforehand. You can download the book, you can print it, or you can get a printed version, because you've got all those details with the words of the Buddha, the reference, and then my words as well to help you. And this will help you to get even more out of the class, because I'm teaching to a certain level of detail in the class, but oftentimes the books have a lot more. So the combination of the classes and the books will really help you become fully informed. If you are only coming to class, okay, that's what you're able to do, then great and wonderful. Pleased that you're here. But if you're able to read and come to class and or listen to the recordings, if you're not able to make class, that's what's going to fully help you get informed to be able to make your way closer and closer to enlightenment and developing your life practice. Tomorrow in the group learning program on Sunday, we're going to be in chapter 17, which is titled Eliminating Fears. Are you really scared? This is where I'm going to help you to understand what's causing the fears and specialized techniques about how to eliminate those fears. No matter what the fears are, there's a solution to that, because an enlightened being doesn't have any fear whatsoever. So if you don't know how to eliminate fears yet, you're going to need to know how to eliminate your fears in order to get to enlightenment, because an enlightened being isn't going to fear anything, even their own death. They're not going to fear that. And then on Wednesday, we're going to be doing loving kindness meditation. So you guys are welcome to come for that, because that's where we encourage, support, and motivate each other in our meditation practice. And then I open up to any and all questions that you guys might have in terms of the teachings, maybe applying the teachings in your life or any other aspect of these teachings. So thank you all for coming to class. Thank you for deciding today's a day that you'd like to learn the teachings of the Buddha. I will see you guys in one of these future classes. Have a very lovely and wonderful rest of your day. Sawadee ka. Thank you again for watching. Enjoy your meditation. Look forward to seeing you online and answering any questions that you might have. Thank you so much.